And then you hear like the Fijians come out of their building and all hell broke loose. And I remember I'm just sitting there in the bleachers, and I'm like, I have like this sense of fear. Like maybe I should run away because this is going to get really ugly really quick. And then the curiosity portion was like, no, fuck the fear. We're going to stay and watch this shit. Hello everybody, Terrence Popp here with another episode of Live from the Lair. And today I'm going to be fielding a question from a guy out there who wanted to know if I served with or alongside any soldiers from other nations, which I have. Okay, now I'm going to go down the list here, and they're not in any particular order. They're just whatever popped into my mind. Now, first comes to my mind is Canada. All right. My first experience with the Canadian soldiers when I was stationed in Fort Lewis, and we went out and did Arctic survival training or Arctic operations training in Alaska. There were some Canadians there doing a parallel, I guess it was a parallel course to us. I mean, we linked up a couple times, and their equipment at the time, I mean, this was in the 80s, their equipment at the time was older than ours. Apparently I didn't know this at the time, but Canada basically gets all of their shit from us, that we just sell it to them when we're done with it, or if we have like an overrun or whatever. That includes all of their fighter aircraft, majority of their helicopters, a portion of their Navy, their small arms, I believe were all American made. They're M16A1s. We were getting the A2s at the time. Though the weird thing is, there was a couple guys walking around there with British Enfield. They weren't 303. I don't think they were 303s. I think they were 308s. They were converted. That was weird. If we finger fucked the shit out of that, that was pretty cool. Maybe they were 303s. I don't even remember. But at the time, the Canadian Army got paid more than us. They were more of, in my opinion, they were more of a professional, fighting force. At least from how I saw them at that point. As I, went up in the ranks, and I got used to, the different more elite units in the United States Army. The Canadian Army really wasn't much to it, and I don't know. I mean, they did their job. They were fairly proficient. They were better in the snow than we were, and all in all, really can't complain. I did run in a few years later. I did work with one of the Canadian para battalions, and those guys were just fucking crazy. I believe that they went off the hook and did they did some crazy shit one too many times and got disbanded, which, is just a crying shame, because in my opinion, paratroopers, when you need to have paratroopers, you can't just stand up a paratrooper battalion on a dime. It takes a long time, and the average soldier isn't really cut out to do that kind of soldier work, like jump out of planes, the heightened physical fitness requirements, the higher standards for in combat operations. Standard infantry just don't do that. So, and in that regard, I think the Canadian Army and the Canadian government, first of all, the Canadian government fucked up big by doing that, and then the Canadian Army suffered, just a huge loss in experience and personnel when that happened. All right, the next one, and I've received quite a few questions about this, is the French Foreign Legion. And they're like, hey, did you ever serve the French Foreign Legion? Did I serve as a member of their unit or attached to them? No, I did not. I did cross paths with them in South America, and again in the multinational force and observer mission in Egypt. Now, I don't know if they still do this, but they actually bring their own fucking prostitutes with them wherever they fucking go. I don't know if they're still doing it, but back then that was just fucking weird, man. Maybe that's some old Europe thinking that they needed to work out. I don't know, but and the way they explain it to me is, like, if you join the French Foreign Legion, you don't even get a fucking pass to go outside the fucking post for 6 months. And then you have to go with a minimum of like 2 or 3 guys. And it takes 2 years before you're allowed to go on an unaccompanied pass out on the town. And some guys who are discipline problems, they won't see a fucking pass for their entire first enlistment, which I believe is 5 years, maybe 6. I'm not sure. But there is truth to be said. You know, if you join the French Foreign Legion and actually make it through their training and get into one of their battalions, you do your first enlistment, you can basically, they will give you citizenship to the country of France, you know, and you can actually get that citizenship under an assumed name. Now, I don't know how viable that is now with the invention of computers and all the other crazy shit, but yeah, it was pretty crazy. And you know, and those guys don't fuck around, all right? Because mainly, they know they're all fucking disposable. You know, the country of France doesn't give a shit about them. They're just some fucking soldiers that they could just throw at a problem and then write them off if shit goes south. But, you know, I guess there's a mindset that goes along with that. Just makes you incredibly dangerous, because those guys are some proficient motherfuckers. I was going to say it. They're some proficient motherfuckers. Now, I never worked directly with their para battalion. I only heard what was spoken about them from some of the other French Foreign Legion units that I did serve, I didn't serve with, but worked or had contact with in my travels. So, yeah. So if any of you got young guys out there want to try your hand at that shit, you know, by all means, you're definitely going to see some crazy ass shit. There isn't a lot of political correctness there. And, you know, if you do any serious time there and you see any action, you're going to become a killing motherfucker.
Don't have enough money saved up for retirement? Thought you could rely on Social Security? Weh? What are you, stupid or something? Well, don't worry, because Aaron Clary is going to tell you how it is, and has created a retirement system for everyday Americans who enjoy their whiskey. Not that we would know about that or anything. Pick up Richard's Retirement on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle. A link is in the description.
All right, now we're going to talk about the Italians. Now, when I was in the MFO, we had a bunch of Italian pilots, and they had 2 trailers at the American camp. I think it was South Camp. I know you had North Camp and South Camp. And those sons of bitches, while I was there 7 months, burned one of their trailers down twice. 2 times. How the fuck do you burn your shit down? That's unbelievable. Apparently they had a hot plate, they were cooking or some shit like that, and they burned their shit down. Now, those guys flew for us. I think they flew a C-160. There's 4 C-160 trans hauls. I think they had a couple Casa 212s. They didn't fly any of our helicopters, and they just flew fixed wing. And I think they only did 90-day or 120-day tours before they rotated out and another batch of fucking idiots showed up. But they pretty much kept themselves. You know, I really didn't have to deal with them that much. But what are you going to do? Oh, another Canadian story going back. One of the commanders of North Camp was a Canadian officer. I'm not going to say his last name. I don't want to tarnish anybody's reputations. But his daughter did show up there on holiday. And her and I came to an understanding that was beneficial for both of us. And unfortunately, we got caught. and it caused almost an international incident, but nothing happened that two consenting adults over the age of 18 didn't agree to. So if you see this Canadian officer, such and such, you know, what are you gonna do? I was only fucking 19, you know. The next ones I want to talk about are the Colombian Army. All right, now the Colombian Army, they were weird. They had a battalion up at North Camp, and they recruit people into their army like at 14 or 15 years old. They're issued one set of boots, 2 sets of uniforms. Their equipment was ratty as fuck. They used it was a HK G3 or a Kemet, which is basically a knockoff of the G3 308 rifle. They walked around when they're on guard post with like 2 magazines. They had like den mothers assigned to each platoon. So, I mean, literally they had like a female officer and her job was, or female NCO, maybe she's an officer, I don't remember. But, you know, these young kids would have crises, and it was like this female soldier's job was to help deal with this shit and unfuck their brain pans. Now, I was, you know, put on guard mount up at North Camp for a bit, and I remember going out there to relieve soldiers, and you could tell a lot of what goes on at a particular guard post if you check the trash, check the footprints, you know, see how much water was drunk, shit like that. You could tell who's fucking off and who's not. Now, I remember going out there to relieve some soldiers, they were Colombian soldiers, and I get there and they're fucking gone. I don't even know where the fuck they were. And, you know, the fucking word went up the chain. It fucking got routed over to the Colombian contingent, and those 2 soldiers got the shit kicked out of them, and they were on sick call the next day getting stitches and teeth pulled out of their fucking face. Not cool. Now, there was a couple of times I went to the same guard checkpoint, which was manned by Fijians, and those are some professional soldiers right there. All right. I remember I checked their trash. They ate like a little bit for one of their meals. They didn't go crazy on the water. You looked at their footprints. They stayed in like a 6-foot circle. They didn't go anywhere. They stayed on their fucking post. And that was, I respected the shit out of that. And later on, I heard some fucking stories about how the Fijians were cut off from alcohol, because whenever they would fucking drink large amounts of alcohol, people would die and shit would fucking break. So they drank this shit called grog. I don't know if it was alcohol, I'm not sure. They told me it was like something made from a root or something like that. And you would walk by their barracks and you could hear the entire battalion singing, like some drinking songs and what have you. And it was fucking crazy, you know? And then here's another, this is actually hilarious. I was up there at North Camp with I think I had a squad of guys with me, and we were participating in the 4 skills competition. And historically, the Fijians win all of it, and nobody even holds a candle to them. So we trained up for this. And one of the nights, you know, there was a soccer game going on. That's about the only thing that was going on up there in North Camp. So we went to go watch the Colombians play the Fijians in soccer. Well, it turned out the Fijian soccer team, which is like 25 guys in a circle in the field, fighting the entire Colombian battalion. Like they like came out like army ants, you know, out of their barracks. And like literally it looked like something out of Conan. I mean, there was this unconscious Colombian soldiers, 2-3 feet deep, and they're just one punching guys, boom, boom. And then you hear like the Fijians come out of their building and all hell broke loose. And I remember I'm just sitting there in the bleachers, and I'm like, you know, I have like this this sense of fear, like maybe I should run away because this is going to get really ugly really quick. And then the curiosity portion was like, no, fuck the fear. We're going to stay and watch this shit. And it went on for like a good 25 minutes. I think 15, 25 guys from the Colombian contingent had to get fucking hauled off to sick call because they were fucked up 3 ways to Sunday. And I believe 2 Fijians had some stitches in their faces, but they were fine. They're walking around. Like, they were literally picking up Colombian guys and stacking them in the back of these fucking Jeeps and rolling them the fuck out. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. So needless to say, I was not too impressed with the Colombian Army. Though I did train, I did, swap, trade a bunch of shit with them. Like they wanted another pair of boots that fit. And I remember a couple guys came in, they were fucking asking around, if they would trade anything. And I was like, and I heard their sob story of how fucked up their shit was. And I had an extra set of boots. I wear 10 and a half. And most of these guys, their boots their feet were way too small. But one guy was close. He was a 10. And I believe he traded me like a cleaning kit and one of their knives and some other fucking just worthless bullshit for a set of boots. And I felt sorry for him, so I gave it to him. Back then you could order shit from US Cav and it would get it mailed to you, so it wasn't a big deal. Because back then US Cav had a catalog, there was no internet. So if you wanted shit, you looked at the catalog, you wrote down the shit, wrote a check, put it in there, fucking mailed it to them, and then you got your shit. Alright, now, I worked with the German Army a little bit when I went up to Germany, and we did some combined exercises with the United States Army. I didn't really see any of their front line combat units, their infantry, but I did see their armor. I did not see the armor that carried their motorized infantry armor. I saw just their tanks, and their tanks were pretty fucking good. Their weapons were good. They were rotating. Back then, they were getting rid of the HK-91, which is the 308, and they're going to a 223 HK weapon. I think the G93, and that was a good weapon too. I fired all that shit with them, and really liked it. Watched their tanks fuck some shit up. But what are you gonna do? We were just getting our M1 Abrams up there online. We were rotating out the M60 tanks, M60 A3s. But the German tanks, I don't remember, I think it was a Leopard, I think they called it. It was pretty fucking badass. It was a good fucking vehicle. But historically, the Germans overcomplicate everything. They over-engineer shit, and to a certain degree, it bites them in the ass. What are you going to do? All right, the Dutch, they were up at North Camp. Didn't really work with them much there, though they ran a couple bars, which had some really great drink specials. I believe they had medical personnel that were working out of the hospital, the TMC at North Camp. And they would send people down to South Camp to man the TMC down there as well, to assist the U.S. soldiers at South Camp. Because South Camp was run pretty much all by America. And there was, a few contingents that came down there, but most of the manpower and muscle movements were done by the American Army. Okay, I crossed paths with soldiers from Holland. I think they may be the Dutch. I'm not sure. I might be confusing them. Again, it was kind of weird back then. The lines of Europe were starting to blur back in the late 80s. And, I wish I had known now what I knew then, so I could warn those guys about the European Union, because that's going to fuck everything up. All right, now I did work with some Iraqi police and Iraqi soldiers when I was in Iraq in 2004, and I'm just going to tell you straight up, they were absolute shit. They were terrible. Okay, they did not give a fuck about you. They didn't give a fuck about their country. They gave a fuck about nothing but themselves and maybe their family. That's it. They wouldn't fucking stick their neck out for you. They wouldn't do shit. All right, they're absolute worthless. No wonder ISIS came in and mopped the fucking floor with those guys. Because, I mean, we gave them weapons and ammo and trained them and gave them radios and NVGs and body armor and helmets. At the end of the day, if you don't have a heart for it, you can have all the equipment in the world and you're still a piece of shit. The equipment really doesn't mean anything. All right? As soon as you run out of ammo or you're not using that proper, the weapons properly, or you have to run, or there is an actual risk of being killed or injured, those guys are fucking gone, man. Gone. So, yeah. And I heard it was the same thing with the Afghanis in Afghanistan, even though I never went there. And I'm glad, because I had a lot of bad premonitions about that place. Okay, now, I did run into some British soldiers in Iraq in 2004. I did a hell of a lot of training with those guys. You know, what was it? One of their Lancer units was there. And they had their, like, Death Head badge stuff. And I traded a beret for that shit. A bunch of stuff. I got a lot of good stuff out of that stuff. I got a British commando knife, a flag, you know, I got one of their BDU tops, a Merlin 3 sleeping bag, or maybe it was a Merlin 1, I don't know. It was one of those sleeping bags that compresses down into this really tiny little thing, about the size of a football, and and I used that thing for the rest of my military career, and I bought 2 more just like it, because there's a big difference in your rucksack from a sleeping bag that compresses down to something like this, which will keep you warm down to 30 degrees, and then something that compresses down to this, which does the same fucking thing. And if you want to be a little bit warmer, you just add a whoopee on top of that, which is a poncho liner, and you're golden. So, yeah, I mean, and we did a couple operations with the British soldiers, and the way they execute and they brief their plans, it's like something from Monty Python. It was hilarious. You know, we had some Aussies there. They were very close to the British, just a hair more professional. But like I sat in on hundreds of op orders. That's an operation order in the United States Army. You go through the op order format, 5 paragraphs, all the annexes. Everyone, by the time it's done, everyone knows what they're supposed to fucking do. They go to the terrain. The terrain model, and they war game the whole fucking thing, so everyone knows exactly what they're doing. They coordinate their maps. They take all that to your junior NCOs. You do the same fucking thing with them, so when the American Army rolls out, everyone should pretty much know what the fuck is going on. Not the British Army. Like, literally, when I sat in there, they had a map. A guy up there pointing, you know, oh, we're going to link up over here. We're going to get the signal, and we're going to assault through to over here, and we're going to consolidate. I was just like, wow. They have the controls were minimal, danger maximum, and those guys had no fucks to give. It was amusing. It really was. All right, now the Aussies, you know, they were there as well. They were more in line with a more thorough planning sequence and more of a thorough briefing sequence. It was not as in-depth as the American Army, but it wasn't as lax as the British Army. So it was somewhere in between. And, you know, the Aussies have a cool accent, which, you know, is pretty good. Where the English, depending upon where they come from in the country, it's almost a completely different accent. And some of them, you couldn't even understand what the fuck they were saying. It literally sounded like they were talking with mashed potatoes in their mouth. I had a hard time with that. But, you know, it's the way it is. You know, different fucking countries do their own fucking thing. Now, I'm trying to think if there's any other fucking, you know, countries. You know, I did see the Colombian Army in action down south. They were actually not that bad. I saw some of the soldiers from Argentina on the ground do their deal, and they were pretty good. I went up against the Panamanian Special Forces, which is the Macho de Monte, and their one of their cav units when I jumped into Rio Hato. They put up a pretty good fight. But, when we jumped in on them, we caught them by surprise because 80% of the shit that they had was still in their arms room. So it would have been really bad if they had a chance to actually get all their weapons out because, it was already crazy as it is with, 2,000 or 3,000 people in a 1.5 mile square area shooting at each other with machine guns in the dark. I just could imagine that if it was, 1,000 of us and, 5,000 to 7,000 of them doing the same fucking shit. It would have been ugly. But yeah. I mean, I probably have some more stories about meeting with and, soldiering with, soldiers from other countries. Like I remember in Ranger School, I worked with a guy from Hong Kong. He was hilarious. We had a couple of guys from some countries in Africa, and they were totally fucked up, but they refused to recycle them more than once a phase because they would get sent home. If they got sent home, apparently 5 or 6 years prior to this point, a couple of soldiers were sent back and then were executed for embarrassing the country and shit like that. And the American Army, back then they had pretty strict standards, but they kind of drew the line at sending you home to get you executed. So, which I understand. But anyway, that's me. I'm going on 25 minutes. Holy shit. I'll talk to you later.